Right. Now the session is recorded. Right. Once again, then good morning, everyone. Then, right, you are with us, right? Lead to webinar, right? You're with me, Monton, kind of Pumpoon as usual, right? I'm kind of like Vice Director for Academic Affairs and Research, the head organizing committee of this Lead to webinar. And in today's session, we are very pleased to have our own, right, junior, right, Professor, right, Dr. Sichon Koowuttayakorn, like who's very keen on multimodality and how to make use of this multimodality in classroom research, classroom teaching, and at the same time, classroom activities, right? So I think multimodality is very important in today's world because it's not just us that we in the class and teach and present the information, right? But we need to include all kinds of multi-models, right? But the question is how we make use of this a new realm, right? Of the new way of multi-channel of the media, and right, Dr. Sichon will actually come to give us more opportunity to see what it is like and how we can make use of it. Then, right? With no further ado, I think it's better for us to welcome our speaker, right? Dr. Sichon Koowuttayakorn, our speaker today.
Thank you, Ajahn Monton, for your lovely introduction. I have to say sorry in advance, like the garbage truck is just coming to my near my house, so you might hear some noise for the first 5 minutes. But thank you, first of all, for thank you, Ajahn Monton and Language Institute for inviting me to be one of the guest speakers for this webinar series. So first of all, how about you guys telling me a little bit about your teaching, like levels of teaching? Who do you, what level of students do you teach? You can let me know in the chat box, maybe. I just want to get a sense of kind of levels, because it is my own experience that I'm going to share with you today. It's going to be higher education, right? But I believe that some of you also teach younger children. Probably if you are in Thailand, maybe Mathayom, high school students. Actually, I got a lot of undergraduate. Any of you teach like primary school students? Not really. Okay, thank you. But first of all, thank you for all of your fast comments in the chat box. By the way, for today, well, I'm going to share with you some ideas that I actually did before with, multimodality. We are going to have kind of like some short sessions of you trying to maybe interpreting some multimodal text. But then at the end, we also have some times for Q&A. So you can, if you have some burning questions, you can either wait till the end for questions, or actually if you have something that you want to ask right away, you can, there are two ways you can do. You can leave the questions in the chat box, or you can actually simply raise hand like this, right? So at the menu bar at the bottom of the screen, we have reactions and raise hand. Right, so if you want to like interrupt me, feel free. That's totally fine. Okay, thank you for your answers, Naka. It's to my surprise, or not really, maybe not, but we got a lot of freshmen, sophomores, like undergraduate level of students, some high school, some primary school levels as well. Okay, ได้เลย ขอบคุณค่ะ thank you everyone. Now let's get started, shall we? Let me share the slide.
Yeah, let's just the little slide presentation.
Okay, so well, as the title, oh, by the way, I don't know if you remember the poster that was, sent out to everyone. You might notice that the color of that posters are in like gray and kind of pinkish. So that's why I'm making my presentation today in the same palette. So the title is, what is multimodality and what can EFL teachers do with it? And by the way, again, I am Dr. Sichon นะคะ but feel free to call me อาจารย์แนท So first of all, before we get into like the content, let me ask you these questions. Do you agree with this statement? People are beginning to communicate, read, write, and learn in new and different ways. Agree, disagree? If you agree, just give me thumb up maybe. I mean for the reaction tab. Or you can actually let me know in the chat box as well. What do you think about this? Yes, no, maybe, not sure, depends. All right, thank you for all the thumbs up,นะคะ. So I guess many of you agree. And I think it's especially true and it's going to be more, I don't know if it can be more true, but it's going to be something more common in the future because of the internet, right? Because of the emergence of technology. There are so many different ways now that we can read and write, right? And because of that, maybe because of the new ways that we read and write, it kind of gives us new ways to learn as well, right? So thank you, everyone. Couldn't agree more. I got a lot of questions, a lot of answers from you, right? So totally. And I think it's because when we are talking about the internet and what our students are exposed to on their everyday basis. When you talk about reading from the screen, it's not just reading, but I think the important thing is that how can they find the information to read in the first place? That is like a very important aspects as well, right? Because there are so many information out there. So when our students read from the screen, they also have to be able to find the information to read in the first place. And then this is about what we're going to talk about today. They have to be able to make meanings, not just from written text, but there are so many things that surround them, right? Images, videos, links, and other forms of media as well. So it's not reading like the reading in the traditional sense. And then another important skill that they have to acquire in this era, I would say, is to rapidly evaluate the source, the credibility, and the timeliness of information, right? Otherwise, that is why I think we got a lot of like fake news or the news that is actually very old, but it gets shared again and become, a viral things or things like that. So that kind of skills, critical evaluation skill is also necessary. And last but not least, when you read online, it's not as linear as when you read a print paper, right? You have to be able to make rapid navigational decisions, right? Are you going to read this current page? Are you going to go click on another link and go to another page, or you revert back or something like that? So there are a lot of non-linear style of reading involving with reading on the screen. And I think that's the same with writing. I don't know if you can actually use the term writing anymore. It is more like composing on the screen, right? Because they have to be able to integrate a lot of modes. And that is what I'm going to talk about next. They have to integrate text, images, audio, videos, or links to communicate a message. Most of the time, when even not just young people, but ourselves, when we post something online, sometimes we don't really want to use text at all, right? We use image as our like dominant mode of communication, right? Or sometimes we just block ourselves doing things, right? Also, there are so many elements of communication that we can use nowadays to make meaning or to compose something on the screen. Another interesting thing that we can think about is audience. And because of the social media, when we write something, you might have a particular group of audience in mind, but at the same time, the audience is unknown, right? So you are sending the message to someone and to no one at the same time. So you kind of have those kind of ideas, I think, of who you want to send this message to, but we're not sure whether that person will get the message or not, right? So the audience is different And also we have to know how to use effective pragmatic strategies as well. Right, so these are some of the ideas. And so yes, right, we are starting to read, write, and learn in a new and different ways. So the topic of my talk today, as the title suggested, I'm going to divide it into two parts. Part one is going to be definition and key concepts. So bear with me for the first, I would say 30 minutes. It might be a little, well, content heavy, but I try my best to simplify it. And then for part two, then we're going to talk about what I actually did for my class and some of the ideas that you can use for yourself if you want to implement multimodality in your own classrooms. All right, now let's get started. Okay, so part one, what is multimodality? Well, I think the term multi or multi mean many, right? And modality means mode. So in essence, multimodality is an interdisciplinary approach that understands communication and representation to be more than about language. And that's it, right? So when we communicate something, yes, we use language as the main medium of communication, but that is not all. Right, when I am talking to you at this moment, I use a lot of like hand gesture and also facial expression to convey meanings to you, right? So when we talk about multimodality, it refers to the use of more than one semiotic modes. And I'm going to talk about the term semiotics later, but semiotic modes, for example, we have linguistic, we have textual, spatial, visual modes, right? So we use more than one semiotic modes in communication practices to create a particular message or set of messages. So let me talk a little bit just about semiotics. So actually, multimodal approach is an approach that, well, to my understanding, used quite a lot for research, right? But this concept has been kind of like adapted or applied to teaching practices as well. But I would say that mainly for the not original purpose, but I would say in the beginning, it's going to be used for research, just like I mentioned, and it actually derived from semiotic or social semiotic. So originally there is a study, area of study called semiotics, which is the study of signs and how signs are used to communicate meanings, right? So signs, we can think of sign as everything concrete or abstract that refers to or stands for something else. Right, so you can look at the dark clouds in the sky as the sign that it's going to rain, or when you text someone you like and they didn't reply, that could be the sign that they didn't really really not interested in you, something like that. We as a human, we love to interpret things. So that is in essence semiotics. And as we know that as human beings, language is like the biggest system of sign that we use to communicate, right? So hence, from social semiotics, it kind of like turned into another field that is called social semiotics. And in this study, it concerns with meaning making and meaning makers. Right, so we look now at signs for meaning making in social context, because for social semiotics, we believe that language and other mode of communication as well, it is a product of social processes. Right, so over time, people might use language for different things in the history, but things have changed and everything evolves. And that is why, that is the study of social semiotics. And that is where multimodality came from. Let's see. Right, so like I mentioned that normally multimodality is used quite a lot in research because it provides approaches, maybe concepts, methods, or framework. We can look at multimodality from different perspectives, actually. It can be a worldview in general, or it can be approaches or a framework for the collection and analysis of various semiotic modes of interaction and the relationship between these. These are just some examples of how, because it is quite interdisciplinary, let's say, the approach with multimodal analysis. So you can see that many different disciplines have kind of applied or implement multimodality in their research. For example, if you are a linguist, you might look at intonation, right? Pausing, gesture, those kind of things. Especially for gesture studies, people will look at hand gesture or facial expression during communication. But there are other disciplines as well, like media studies and journalism. For example, if you're going to look at source of news right now, news on Twitter, Twitter platform, social media. So you can actually look at how images and text and probably hashtags as well on Twitter, you know, and the way that journalism is played out on that platform. So you can use multimodal analysis in that area as well. Same as comic studies, you can look at page layout, colors, lines, and then also film studies, like audio and video resources. So there are a lot of things that you can do with multimodality. But that is in research. So why? The question is like, then why adopt a multimodal approach? And I actually, for my question, I would say, why not? Right? Because it's actually, if you think about it, multimodality is like part of our everyday lives. You might not really recognize it, but you actually do. I mean, our everyday communication is multimodal in nature, right? We're not just using language. We do. Well, it is, like I mentioned, it is like the dominant, the most salient mode of communication that we use. But sometimes you say one thing. If it is in Thai culture, we tend to have this joke when we say that when women are ngon na or noi chai, I don't know how to say that in English. Actually, they don't have that term. But when you are upset as a lady and you feel upset, and when your boyfriend asks you, "Are you upset?" and you say, "No, I'm not. I'm fine." You know, that language say that you are okay, but actually you are not. And you say that you are not okay through other form of communication, but not through language, right? So multimodality is actually a part of our everyday lives. And it is more important today when we talk about internet and technology and the way that young people communicate or use language online. So it assumes that representation and communication always draw on multiplicity of modes, right? And I think what's important is that all of which contribute to meaning, right? Like I mentioned, when you say things, just for example, when you post some, let's say Facebook post, when you post something on Facebook, right? You might have some image and then a little bit of caption. Those two modes or those two forms of communication are as important, right? They are equally important. If you only look at the caption without looking at the image, or vice versa, you might not get like the whole meanings or the whole ideas of what, you know, the producer want to convey. So all of the modes have some meanings of its own, and the meaning will be greater if everything is understood in combination, let's say, right? So if we only focus on written or spoken languages, it removes the possibility of finding meanings and producing meanings in other forms, right? So, but I understand that because this is why I talk about this for EFL teachers, right? Because we have a feeling that we teach language, right? So we have to put language first, either written or spoken. And that is true, but there are some ways that you can actually throw in like the understanding of other modes of communication as well. But yeah, I just want you to kind of adopt the idea that multimodal or multimodality is everywhere and it is a part of our lives. So let's talk a little bit about mode. Bear with me for a few more seconds before we do some fun activities. So I actually use this term a lot already, but one of the key term or the key concept that you should know about multimodality is mode. So what is mode? Mode is an organized set of semiotic resources for making meaning. If it is too complex to understand, then you can just think about mode. Image is a mode. Right? We have gesture, we have writing, we have speech. So those are modes, and they are available to you to make meaning from. But the thing about mode is you have to think about mode as this. Every mode has a different purpose, right? So a creator or you, or the meaning maker, maybe we can talk about that. A creator or a meaning maker chooses mode that best fits the content and the social conventions. So we look at the creator's interest and like the purpose of what they want, and not the purpose, but the meanings that they want to convey. So you have something that you want to say to the world, let's say, and you have to choose the best mode, right? The best mode that fit what you want to convey. Again, if we go back to Facebook posts, maybe we feel that image speaks louder than word. Most of the time it's true, especially for if you are on Pinterest or Instagram, right? You probably will start by, posting image of some sort, and later you might want to add some language or written text as a complement, but the dominant mode might be image. However, if you think about doing research or write something formal, something academic, something when we talk about formal situation, of course, you're going to opt for written text first, right? You have to really write well with, language that we have. And later, if you think that some of the concept that you write, people might not understand, then you might want to add some image in terms of like flow chart or tables or figures, things like that. But then it is the social conventions that kind of like govern us what mode is good for what purposes, so that is mode. And I think what's interesting about mode is that you have to think that it is not static, because we are in social semiotics. And like I mentioned, that we look at sign as like the processes of the social process, let's say. Sign is a social process, so it's always change and evolve with people. So within social semiotics, a mode is understood as an outcome of a cultural shaping through its use in the daily social interaction of people. So the more we use the language, the more it evolves into something else. And I think that is, you can see a lot of like internet slangs, I would say, right? And that is, of course, the cultural shaping of things. In Thai, we have a very clear examples of how we use 555. For example, to stand for laughing, or it kind of equals to LOL, or laugh out loud, probably, right? Because in Thai we say ha ha ha, right? And it represents the laughing, right? So of course, if you say ha ha ha, maybe 20 years ago, people wouldn't understand that. But because of the social shaping and tools and conventions and everything, it becomes a norm for us to laugh in this way, right? So you have to think about mode as a product of, so cultural shaping. And I got one question actually. asking about, is its approach similar to mode in holiday functional grammar? I would say, I have to say, I don't know much about holiday functional linguistics. I just know some basics, but I would say yes, because I think there are some branches from semiotics itself. It branched out into so many disciplines or fields of study. And I would say, yes, one of that fields is social semiotics, right? And then we have within social semiotics, holidays, functional linguistics. So I would say yes. And I got actually, thank you for your, Mr. Andrew, for helping me answer this question. It is related to SFL. Now, where was I? So modes are also particular to our community. That is another thing. Or culture where there is a shared understanding of their semiotic characteristic rather than universal. Excuse me. So you cannot think that using, let's say, again, in some culture or some community, using image like all visual modes is something that is very normal, let's say. But you cannot assume that when we are outside of that community, it's going to be the same, right? So if you think about social media, of course, different platforms require different kind of communication. So like I mentioned, if you go to Pinterest or Instagram, of course, visual is going to be dominant on those platforms. However, when you go to other social media sites like YouTube, it's going to be video and things like that, right? So it is quite kind of particular to a community or sometimes in culture, just like I mentioned about 555 or ha 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 in Thai as well. So you cannot really assume that the understanding of modes is going to be universal, right? Because it is a culture, a product of a cultural shaping. Another term that I would like to talk about is modal affordance. So affordance. Modal affordance refers to what it is possible to express and represent easily with a mode. Well, to put simply, it raises the question of what a mode is best for what. Again, you have to kind of know what kind of message you want to convey and use the right mode, right? Because each mode have different affordances. So in multimodal text, each mode carries a particular weight or type of functional load. For example, visual and linguistic resources have different affordances, right? So they are more suitable for different kind of purposes. If you look at, I don't know, like advertisement on the street, on billboards, right? Visual resources are going to be quite big because they are, suitable for those kind of purposes. On the other hand, text might not be that preferred. Just because people are driving by quickly, they might not see the text that clear, things like that. So affordances of each modes are different for each context. Okay, and then, so now I think it's time to do some multimodal analysis from what I have talked about. This is actually the book from Crest 2011. But actually, oh, by the way, actually I got some comments as well about the book. If you are interested in knowing more about multimodality, Crest and Van Leeuwen are the two persons. They are like the father of multimodality. So thank you for the recommendation. You can look at the recommendation in the chat box by Shawali. I think so. Crest and Van Leeuwen and probably Jewett as well. They are kind of like talk a lot about multimodal analysis and what you can do. Right, but this is also this information from a book, by Crest, not a book, but a chapter by Crest. Let's do this. So let's take a look at this and look at what we have. So these are street signs. They are signs that give directions on how to get to the parking lots of the two supermarkets. So we have Morrisons over here and then Waitrose. So first of all, let's look at these two signs. And can you tell me the modes? What are the modes used in these signs? We have already talked about modes, right? What are the modes? You can let me know in the chat box. You can let me know via the microphone if you want to. And there are, of course, different modes that are used in these signs, right? I'm waiting for some more answers, but I got some already. Thank you.
Map, would that be considered a mode?
ค่ะใช่ a map exactly. Well, a map is like a visual, right? It is an image ขอบคุณค่ะ so you have thank you for all the responses as well. Text, map, visual space, color, words, images. Awesome. So I would say that if you look at it broadly, we can say that there are linguistic and visual modes. But of course, within each of these big modes, there are a lot of tiny little things that you can look at. Right? So for linguistic or for writing, you can look at fonts or typeface that they use. The letter case, you have uppercase on the left for Morrisons and then lowercase for Waitrose. Right? The layout is actually pretty much the same in the sense that the name of the supermarket is at the top. We have the map on the left and then some description on the right hand side, right? There are difference in colors, too bad. These are from like the print text, the printed book. So we cannot really see colors. But what we can say here from the black and white contrast would be the fact that for Morrison, I think the background is darker, right? And then the font is really white. So you can see the contrast are clearer here on the left. For Waitrose, maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure what is the color of the background, but it could be something lighter for sure, right? There's some lines and things like that. So there are a lot of things that you can look at when we talk about modes. All right. Now, so each size make a specialized use of these modes to construct an ensemble of modes. So we talk about when we put modes together, we can say orchestration of mode or ensemble of modes. And the purpose is to make meaning, to shape the meaning intended. And that is, I think, the most important about multimodality is the fact that, well, it focuses on, like I mentioned, the meaning making and the meaning makers, right? So yes, we know that there are a lot of modes that combine, but what are their possible meanings? That is what we want to focus on the most, right? So by looking at modes and, you know, that maybe their relationship, the relationship between modes, the affordances, things like that, we can now start thinking about the possible meanings from these two sides. So this is the question that I'd like you to think about a little bit. So what is the meaning overall of each of the two sides? How is the meaning constituted? Right? Just thinking about the meaning overall. And then we can think deeply about the difference between the two. Does the meaning of one side differ from the meaning of the other? And if so, in what ways? Right? Is it the same? Is it different? What do you think? Right? And then you can also think about who is being addressed and how. Of course, these are just some guiding questions. You don't have to answer like 1, 2, 3 in order or things like that. But hopefully these questions will get you start thinking about these two sides a little deeper. So the meaning overall, right? And then maybe the meaning that are different. and then who is being addressed. All right, so I will just show you the sign right here. Oh, actually, wait, let me, okay, I have a larger one right here. Okay, so what about you thinking about this a little bit for like, I don't know, 5 minutes maybe, and then we'll come back and share. Okay, and I would love for you to, if you want to, you can really, you know, unmute yourself, you know, turn on your microphone and talk to us. All right, so 5 minutes and we'll come back. Actually, let me put the question on the chat box for you, just in case. Okay. Oh, by the way, I forgot. Actually, you know what? I forgot to tell you one more thing. We haven't yet. So first, I have to tell you about this. So, well, once you start thinking about it, you might not. Sometimes, if you are outside of England, it might not get you too far for the interpretation I meant, because we are not British. And as for me, for myself, I've never really, well, I've been to England, but I never really lived there. I don't know the difference between Morrisons and Waitrose. What are they? What kind of products they carry, you know, things like that. So actually, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, but I got this information from a friend who studied in UK for their for her doctoral degree, and this is what she told me. Comparing to, let's say, if comparing to Thai culture, we'll say that Morrisons can be comparable to Big C or Lotus in a sense that, you know, if you want some product for a bargain, you know, you can go to Morrisons. They might have some promotions, something on sale, things like that. So just similar to Big C or Lotus, where you can get something for a very good price. So for budget-minded, maybe Morrisons. On the other hand, for Waitrose, it might be equal to Top Supermarket or Gourmet Market, right? Their target customers can be a little different than Morrisons, right? You might not want to get things on a good price, like a bargain, but when you go there because you want to find some specific products or items that you cannot find elsewhere, like imported products or things like that, or you know. So there are some difference in terms of I think their marketing and their target customers. Was I right? Am I right? For those of you who have experience living, studying, you know, or if you are actually living in UK, let me know. Okay, so I got a response saying, I think Morrison is between Big C and Tops. Okay, I've got it. So between Big C and Tops. What about Waitrose? How can you compare it to in terms of Thai culture though?
I would say it's like Gourmet Market.
For Waitrose, yep.
Yeah, okay. For Waitrose, like our Villa, something like that.
Okay, Villa Market, no?
Yeah.
And actually, yes, exactly. That's what I noticed as well. Thank you, Andrew. You can find Waitrose brand products in Top Supermarket in Thailand. And believe it or not, for Big C, I actually walked to Big C once and I saw a product imported from Morrison in Big C. I don't know if it still holds true, but I saw like the cereals, the brand, Morrison's brand cereal at Big C once. So I don't know how it works, but that's kind of thing. And I think it's helpful if you kind of like know the background a little bit, because Chris himself is British, and he analyzed these two signs based on the cultural knowledge that he have, you know, of these two supermarkets. But, you know, we as an outsider, we might not get that. So that is why I want you to kind of like get some background knowledge first. All right, now let's get back to the analysis. 4 more minutes maybe. And if you have some ideas already, you don't have to really like wait for me to call everyone back to the whole group. You can feel free to is he German? Oh, I'm not sure. Not sure, but anyway, just if you have some ideas, let me know in the chat box. But we will take another 5 minutes.
Good morning, Ajan.
Good morning, Kha. Who's that?
Can I give my simple interpretation about the pictures?
Sure, please go ahead.
Okay, for me, it's like give directions for every individual, but the image sometimes is confusing if you don't know how to read direction. And I think it's catching, but a little bit confusing. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. ขอบคุณค่ะ. So
I'm teacher Linda from Ratwinit Bangkiao School.
Okay. Can you say one more time the school that you are working at?
Ratwinit Bangkiao School.
Oh, okay ค่ะ ราชวินิตบางแค
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ajahn.
All right. So what she just mentioned, that the image can be confusing, and that I am totally agree, especially for Morrison, because there's nothing at all. I mean, for the map itself, right? It didn't say anything. No description, no street names, nothing. And I think that is because for whoever making this street sign, I think it tailored to the locals, right? Because if you drive past this sign, you might already be familiar with the area around this block, and you know exactly where to go and where to park. You know exactly where you are, right? So I guess in this case, there's nothing, because, you know, like I mentioned, it tailored probably to local shoppers, I would say. That is one of the possible explanation. Let's take a few more. Let's take 2 more minutes. And then we can think about something else. Again, just you can think about uppercase, lowercase, you know, the font type, the typeface that they use actually, and other things as well. Okay, shall we come back? Do you have any idea, anything that stand out to you? And it doesn't have to be right. Well, there's no right or wrong. This is meaning interpretation. You're trying your best to get the meanings out of whatever you see, right? So it can be totally different for different people from different background, right? So if we have anything. Ooh, okay. We got some very, it's not really technical, but if you know the difference between serif and sans serif typeface, you will notice that there's a difference between these two typeface. So this is serif, right? Am I right? This is serif, ใช่ไหมคะ? No, this is called serif because you see that there, the font, the typeface has some like foot on top and bottom like this. So this is serif, but this is for Waitrose, it is sans serif. So sans actually means without or zero, if I got it right. So sans serif is typeface without anything, any line footing thing, right? So of course, it is different. So what kind of feeling you get from reading these two different things though? I got, if we look at the use of language, the word off and entrance on. So if you just look at the description, right? Car park off Hurslet Road. And then this one, car park entrance on Annette Road. So off and on, there are different ways of them to kind of tell the direction. And then the capitalized fonts present Morrisons in a more formal sense. So for this person, thank you for this participant. She thinks that, so for this one, it is more formal. And then for this one, the uppercase, lowercase render more relaxed atmosphere, right? So for, and that is, I totally agree. And the second one, use W sign on the map. Okay, so let's talk about this first. Besides, we have serif and sans serif. The typeface that Morrisons use are very thick, right? And they use all uppercase, not just for the name, but also their description, the map directions as well. So everything is very formal, very strict, maybe, and it's something that may be shouting to you. For some, I did this analysis before, and some students said it is more masculine. She feels that it gives more of a masculine feeling. That could be the word, right? And on the other hand, Waitrose seems more feminine in the sense that the line, the font, the typeface is lighter. Everything is lighter in a sense, right? And then you can see that the second one, okay, so I'm reading your answers right now. So the second one, you see the W, which stands for Waitrose, right? So it is easier to read and to understand, probably to promote the mall, while the first one doesn't, okay, right? So you can, I would say that this one is for, again, for local people, maybe they will have to understand what are these streets and things like that, and they know exactly where to get there. But then for Waitrose, you have the street names here and there, and then the car park is here, and then this is the supermarket, you know. And then capitals were used for Greek and Roman tombstone. Oh, okay, that is very historical, but they used to do this as a proper name. All right, I think that's it. And I got capitals they use at the beginning of the sentence and proper names, of course, then connote importance and respect.
อาจารย์ครับก่อนอาจารย์ได้ยินไหมครับ
ได้ยินค่ะ
Okay, I just add with the interpretation of this one regarding with the capitalization and the font style. Okay, I have read a research about marketing and branding and making a logo of a brand or making a logo of a brand. And it says in the research, they found out that brand or names of business or companies that are in capital, it says more of authority or power with the brand. And they also found out that people tend to like those brands that are not in capital, like for example in Waitrose, because the impact of these letters or these words are like friendly, or it's kind of like pleasing with the customers. So with this kind of pictures, we can see that the Morrisons is kind of showing power and authority with the customers. Okay, you need to go to Morrisons and you need to park your car here, something like that. But when you look at the Waitrose, it's kind of friendly and eye pleasing, and yeah, it's kind of like soft. Yeah, I think that is one of the meaning also of these two pictures. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Anyway,
you.
I'm from Chulalongkorn University.
Can I also support that a little bit?
Sure.
Right. I do agree with you exactly, because I've been, well, I used to do my doctoral in the UK as well, and I feel that because the people who go to Morrison and Waitrose are kind of like, let's say that we are two different financial status. Let's say that if we go to Morrison's, I mean, we are thinking about the price a little bit more, and for Waitrose, and they're long established, and it feels to me like Morrison has a lot more to prove, because in the UK, if you are a shop that has been established like maybe like 100 years ago, like Waitrose, then you've got nothing else to prove. Like, you don't have to prove to anyone, and you can be friendly to anyone without being the authority. But Morrison is I think is a bit younger than Waitrose, and they're still trying to make their market. And I was quite interested in like the capital as well. So I searched, I did some Google search and found that Morrison just changed their capitalization from like the capital ones to the like the sentence case not a long time ago. And it was quite interesting why, like, it seems like they're trying to modernize, like, instead of using the like more traditional block style, they just use just normal sentence case but added the word since 1899. Oh, it seems like, so Morrison is a bit older then. Right. Well, maybe I was wrong. Morrison is older, but Waitrose is a little bit more posh, let's say.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
I think that's all.
I think,
Yeah.
John, aside from linguistic aspect of the picture, we also need to study the history of these kind of brands, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But I think it's very interesting. I mean, what I'm sharing right now here is what Ajahn Nantikan sent to me. So yes, in the past, Morrison used to be all capital, right, all uppercase, and just like you mentioned that the research, maybe the research found that customer doesn't really like this. It seems like it is too authoritative, just like shouting at them. They prefer something more delicate, more friendly. So maybe that is why the Morrison has changed their logos a little bit over here from 2016, right? That is really interesting. Anything else before we move on? Let me check the chat box a little bit. They are differ on the overall visual appeal. Exactly, I think everything. So you can see that when we trying to look at just everything in detail, like typeface, uppercase, lowercase, the information that they put on the the written text and everything, it kind of gives you the ideas, right? That they cater to different group of customers, really, and they might want to, like, the message that they want to convey are different, right? So this is what Chris, actually, because I got this from Chris, right? So he already analyzed it, and this is what he came up with. You can either agree or disagree, right? So you can say that for Morrison, it uses a lot of thick, heavy lines. So just I think all of you guys summed it up really well. right? So it stands for like no nonsense shopping. Shoppers with feet on the ground who cares about value for money. You know, something you just go there, get your stuff, get whatever you want and leave, you know. But then for Waitrose, it feels more lighter. They use lighter lines all throughout. You might want to get into Waitrose and just walk along the aisle a little bit, you know, just do some window shopping, browsing around, you know, you're not just get in and out quickly, you know, something is different. So the message they are trying to convey maybe is we are interested in elegance, in taste, in a lighter touch, right? So the feelings, the message, the meanings between these two signs are different. And what Chris concluded from these two are the fact that in writing and in image, if you just look at that broadly, vaguely, you will see that the sign designed to answer the questions of how do I get into the car park of this supermarket. I mean, both signs kind of give the same directions, right? I mean, the same message, which is how can you get to the supermarket. However, if you look closely into the font, the color, the image and everything, the signs seem to answer another question, which is which of these supermarkets is the one that I would prefer to go to, right? So he said that besides geographical directions that these two signs give, they also give what he calls social directions, right? Which of these supermarkets belong to you? Which like type of personality you are and which one you want to go to, basically. Agree? So these are the things that he talked about. So hopefully you get some ideas of what you can actually do, you know, just by looking at these street signs everywhere. And I got a question right here. Is there any similar example in Thai context? I think so, right? And guess what? It can actually be a research because now we are thinking about our own culture, right? So now this is the examples from UK. What about in Thailand? What about wherever you are? Will we observe something similar, something different? And I think that is the whole point of multimodality. It kind of, just like I mentioned, that multimodal text is everywhere, is surrounding us. However, we have never really thought about that too much, right? We never really think about the meaning of how these signs convey meaning altogether with different modes. And that is what I hope you get from this, right? So now, you know, when you walk out to the street, see the signs, the advertisement and things like that, you can start thinking about, what modes do they use and like what are their possible meanings, right? And it can be your research for sure. All right, now shall we move on? 1 hour has passed. So now let's talk about part two. Part two, which is, so now how can you adapt whatever we just did earlier into our own classroom, multimodality in language education? Of course, I think there are, just like when you use multimodal approach to your research, there are different levels of engagement that you can do with this, right? And I think it's the same with in the classroom. There are different ways you can do this. If your students are very proficient, very advanced, maybe you can actually do something similar to what we just did, you know, analyzing signs and things like that. But it requires a lot of, you know, proficient in language, you know, to be able to really verbalize what they think. And also they might have a lot of skills with critical and analysis as well, right? But today we're going to do something softer first, okay? So just ease yourself into this. So multimodality in education. Basically, if you want to adapt or implement multimodal approaches to teaching and learning, it means that it involves the complex weaving of multiplicity of modes, right? When you teach or when your students learn, it should involve not just text, not just written text, but the multiplicity of modes, such as word, image, gesture, movement, sound, and space. So just kind of like let your student know that there are more than words when we communicate, right? And it focuses on both analyzing the existing multimodal text. So actually, basically what we just did, which is analyzing the text, right? So from now on, I will call it multimodal text, just to stand for, every text that is multimodal in nature. And also, I think it's important for them to compose text using multiplicity of modes in diverse forms. So there are a lot of things that you can do, right? Graphic novels, picture books, brochures, poster, blogs. Right now, you can have them write blogs or do some vlogging, social media posts, or even infographic. I think infographic is a great way to kind of like combine text and image, because you need to have both in order for that message to be clear, I think. And I would say that at this stage, you might say, Ajahn, I've already done that with my students. Because I believe that as language teachers, we don't really just let them always write essay, right? So I believe that you have already actually adopted multimodality or multimodal text for your students' assignments and projects, which is a great thing. It is a great start. But today, I hope you can do a little bit more with that. So not just assigning them multimodal text for them to create, and that's it. That would not be what we consider multimodal just yet, right? Because again, the focus, the emphasis is on meaning, understand meaning, and what different modes combine and what meanings they can convey, right? So you have to be more, let's say, more aware of what you actually create, right? So it's great if you already ask them to do picture books, some poster, or even presentation or play, things like that. But now let's dig a little deeper into what you can do. But first, let's talk about why teach multimodal literacy. So effective contemporary communication, of course, require young people to be able to compose meaning through ensembling multiple modes of communication. And that is what we talked about, like in the first slide, when I asked whether you agree that people read, write, and learn in different ways, and you said totally agree, right? And that is pretty much it, because young people are surrounded with this kind of multimodal text every day. So to be able to effectively communicate in today's contemporary world, it's no longer just about having a correct having a grammatically correct sentence produced, right? There are something more. And I think having them chance to convey meanings through multimodality actually allow them to have more opportunities to create, to have clearer meanings, right? Because just like I mentioned that sometimes word cannot express everything that we feel or what we want to say, right? So allowing them to have multiple choices, multiple resources to say something or to express something is actually better than just having language, right? So multimodality allows us to communicate more clearly as we have multiple methods to display our content or to express our intentions. So that is always, I think, a good thing, right? More is better than just one. But also, if you think about teaching multimodal literacies in terms of analyzing or understanding the existing multimodal text, it's important, I think, in that part, it will kind of like help encourage their critical thinking skills, right? Because as we know, we are every day bombarded with media, all kinds of media. And most of the time, we are the passive audience. We don't actually think about that too much. We might just receive the surface meaning but we don't actually think about something deeper, or that in the traditional way we say reading between the lines, right? Sometimes we don't normally do that. But actually, like I mentioned, we engage with a large number of multimodal texts. And most of the time, it's implicitly persuade us or reinforce cultural stereotypes, right? And actually, I think a lot of people have done this already in research, using multimodal analysis to say things about, the standard of beauty. Why do we have to be white all the time, especially in Asian countries or Asian culture, or the roles of genders and things like that. Usually it is kind of implicitly persuade you or make you think about the particular ideas as natural, with which in fact it is not, right? But it's sometimes try to naturalize some idea to us through media. And if you want to get deep into that, of course, you can use this kind of multimodal analysis text to help them think more critically about, how media shapes the world. So that is, I would say, kind of a deeper level. But for the start, I think it is also good for them to actually just be able to compose multimodal text themselves, right? Do you have any comments? No, I heard some microphone. Anyway, so what I actually did, or what I suggest you, start thinking or doing would be stage 1. I have 3 stages actually, but in order to kind of like try to implement multimodality in the classroom, you can think about first analyzing multimodal text, of course, because I think it's helpful to just, let them know what's out there or what's available to them before having them actually compose something, like compose the multimodal text themselves. And the first thing would be to let them identify, label, and interpret modes, right? It can be something similar to what we did for the first half of this session, but maybe something lighter, something, well, it can actually use a lot of advertisement nowadays as like the multimodal text samples where your students can, identify and label the modes that are used, and then maybe some hidden meanings within those modes. So again, at this stage, students are exposed to and asked to observe multimodal text. If you want to, you can just ask them to bring in the multimodal text themselves. But because I think later on for stage 2, we're going to let them actually create a multimodal text themselves. So I recommend that whatever type of multimodal text you ask them to analyze should be parallel to what you're going to let them do or create at the end, right? So that they kind of like have a lot of examples and a lot of exposure to those genre of text. For example, if you want to focus on written text, maybe a poster, infographic, or if you're going to ask them to write blog, then have them read a lot of blog posts. On the other hand, if you focus more on verbal, like oral presentation or, things like that, so you have to cater to those kind of genre as well. So whatever multimodal text you think are appropriate for your students and the tasks that you are about to let them do later, that would be a good example. And I think what is also important is here, they are also provided with meta language. I think at this stage, when you are trying to expose them with a lot of examples and have them like identify and think about modes and possible meanings, you also have to teach them some language, meta language, thinking, right? That is meta, but they need some vocabulary so that they can really kind of either verbalize or write the critiques or what they think about the analysis better if they have the language for them that is kind of helpful. What the goal here for this stage is to use prior and new knowledge to share and understand meaning through all the modes, right? So just focus on, again, meaning, share and understand meanings. So of course, some meta language that you can teach them would be the 5 modes, but of course it will depend again on whatever multimodal text you are focusing on. If it is presentation, of course you might have to look at gesture, like gestural, not just linguistic, of course, linguistic, tone of voice, intonation, organization of sentences, phrases, things like that. But also you might want them to focus on facial expression, hand gesture, body language. Spatial is actually another interesting thing that we haven't talked about enough, which is kind of like the space, right? Spatial is space. So arrangement, organization, proximity, things like that. If you will ask your student to do a play or some kind of like role play, something like that, maybe spatial is something that you want to focus on. Audio would be another thing. Audio for maybe, if you ask them to record the presentation, or even if you are asking them to do some video clips, maybe, visual. But for my case, I actually focus on written language. So the two modes that I focus on the most are linguistic and visual. Right, so things about color, layout, style, size, and perspective. So let me show you a little bit about visual that I talked about, because, well, in my case, I taught graduate students actually. So their proficiency, well, that they're not really like really advanced though. I would say like high intermediate, but they kind of already have a toolkit in terms of language to carry on. So what I focus on here would be to familiarize them with vocabulary about visual and graphic design. And I think it's really helpful, and you don't have to think that graphic design is only for designer or for people working in marketing or PR, things like that. I think there are some basic rules that everybody can make use of, right? So just let me share something that I taught them when I taught them the meta language or the vocabulary. So type, right? Sometimes we say typeface. Sometimes we use the term font. There are a slight difference between typeface and font, but that's okay. I'm going to say typeface now. So you can say that typeface is the message. And I think it's totally true. When we think back about Morrison and Waitrose, right? They use different typeface, uppercase and lowercase, and the type that they use are essentially different. And those, just the type itself, give us the message, right? So you can think about type as the message itself, because it becomes what we are trying to say. It is a powerful part of how we communicate. Right? So sometimes if you look at this, the stop sign, this is very normal, everyday stop signs. You can see it. Once you see it, you stop, right? How about this sign? If the type has changed into something like this, will you stop? Probably not, right? Because it's more playful. It's not authoritative. It's not just like this one, which is clear. And again, when we talk about uppercase, it is very strong. It just tells you to do exactly what the sign wants you to do, in comparison to this one, maybe not so much. Right? So sometimes we use font just because the Microsoft Word or PowerPoint suggests us that this is a good font, but actually there are a lot more that we can do with it, right? Let's look at another example. This is a magazine. It is kind of like a magazine article talking about unrest, like the situation in Syria, which is quite like intense, right? Unrest in Syria and its regional implications, so and so. So the boiling point is the term, and you can see that in the background, like the image is very, they are soldiers, they are practicing something, right? They are in a very, how to say that? Stress, it's not really stress, but very serious mood, let's say. So the boiling point right here, the font that they use right here is quite appropriate. However, what about this one? The feeling has changed, right? Even though you don't know what the boiling point means, it's the feeling that you get from these two different typefaces is totally different. So thinking about typeface is actually quite important for the message, right? So type is the message. That is one thing that, you know, you can kind of like direct your students' attention to. And if you want to do more, you can talk about serif and sans serif and stuff like that. We're not getting into that over here, but just, you know, so you know that there's something that you can do with type. Also, what about colors? As with type, color becomes the message itself. Again, sometimes we just, you know, we see the color and we say, yeah, that's fine. But if we really think about it, if we want to go to the bank, let's say Scotia Bank, which one is more trustworthy to you? Which bank do you want to go to? Probably the one on the right. Anyone wants to go to the bank on the left? Maybe you do because you just love pink or something like that. But normally, right? And colors, I said, has a lot to do with research. And actually it is something that people working in marketing and PR really have to pay attention to. Most of the time, colors can be stereotypical, right? You say red is dangerous, red is strong, red is about passion. Well, most of the time it can be, but you know, some other time in some other culture, red means luck as well, right? It is very lucky color in Chinese, right? So there are many different meanings attached to colors, and most of the time it's about research. And I think that goes back to the concept of multimodality in the sense that everything is culturally shaped, right? So you have to look at particular culture and community. And, you know, you think about where you want this color to attract who or which group of people, let's say. But in this case, probably red is a more suitable color than pink. And also, if we talk about research again, actually, like red, if you notice, like a lot of fast food restaurants use red. KFC, McDonald's, Wendy's, what else? There are a lot of kind of like but fast food brands that use red. And that's because the research shows that red stimulates appetite, right? It makes you want to eat more. So, and then on the contrary, blue is something that represents trustworthiness, maybe reliability, sorry for the typo, you know, something that is reliable, maybe authoritative and safe as well. So hence a lot of brand of automotive, let's say like cars like this, like Ford, Subaru, Hyundai and Yamaha, they tend to use blue because it kind of represents safety, something that you can trust. However, if you look at Ferrari, right, they don't really care about safety. I mean, for their branding, you know, they just want to be something that is fast, exciting, something probably on the edge of dangerous or something like that, you know. So the color really reflects the branding, and I got that comments in the chat box as well. Thank you. So exactly. So the colors is something that sometimes you don't really think about much. You may use the color just because you like it, just like type, just like the font that you use it because you like it, but we don't really think about the meaning behind your choices. For example, if you're going to create a logo for a dental clinic, Third Street Family Dental, you know, using blue and red, which is kind of like it's a warm tone. It might feel a little too exciting in comparison to if you're using green and blue. It might feel more relaxed. It might be better because you don't want your customer your patient going into a clinic and feel like they're going to die, right? And this is kind of like giving them that vibe. So maybe color that is cooler, give them more feeling of the security and safety could be a better choice, right? So thinking about color would be another thing that you should pay attention to. And then there are a lot more about the language of design. So these are again in the realm of meta language, right? So apart from teaching them about that, there are again a lot of things that you can talk about. And these again are, well, it rooted from the knowledge of graphic design, designing, but you can actually access this information online. So you can kind of like take a look yourself and see what's relevant to your students and the context and your lessons, let's say. But let's talk about three. There are a lot more, but let's talk about three things that I think important and helpful in helping them analyze and then later create their own multimodal text. We can talk about alignment, right? The ways that elements are aligned on a page, especially text, which is often aligned at left, right, or center. And actually, you know what, I forgot to mention this, but when we think about multimodality, you would think of, you know, creating poster, doing play, or something that is really advanced, like really multimodal. However, if you think about text, like Microsoft Word essay, you know, when you ask your students to type something in Microsoft Word and submit it to you, it is actually multimodal as well, if you, because they have to think about the format of the page, right? How, like the margin that they're going to leave, the fact that the text is going to align left, right, or center. When are you going to make some like negative space? When are you going to enter the new paragraph, you know, for your audience or for your readers to see or read easier? That kind of thing is actually the new things that you can think about as well. Even though you are working a lot with written text, there are some multimodal elements that you can throw in and let your student, you know, care more about not just typing things onto the page and send it to you, but also think about the aesthetic aspect of it. And I think it will be very helpful if you teach them things about resume or, you know, CV, because they really have to create a nice page to tell their story, to tell their, to describe their qualifications, right? So everything matters in that sense. So alignment. And then we can talk about contrast and then proximity as well. Let's talk about, let me show you some examples. Alignment, and then emphasis, repetition, contrast. But sorry, it's only be this one. This one is a typo. I should delete that page. Okay, but first let's look at alignment. Okay, so let's say you want your students to create a poster. It is quite okay for this one, but there is something a little bit off in this, in the kind of like the composition or the layout of this poster. Can you see what it is? Sorry, the text is really small, but if you are very picky and if you look closely, any idea something that can be better in this poster?
I think in this poster with advertising the camp about blues in the city, we can see here that the word camp is the biggest word in the poster. And I think it's not that really important. I think what should we focus here is blues in the city, which is the camp, right? I think it would be better if we gonna make the word or the title, the Blues in the City 2018, would be like bigger than the camp. Because the camp is just like advertisement, but the name of the camp would be the Blues in the City, and that is the main focus or the highlight of that poster. And also the picture, I think, would be better if it's bigger. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe the whatever emphasis, or whatever thing, the element you want to emphasize, that should be, you know, big or smaller. All right. Thank you. Okay, that could be, that is true. But then if we talk about alignment first, you will see here over here, actually, if you draw a line from W to everything, you will see that nothing is lining up. Do you notice that? You know, the picture here starts over here, but then the second picture starts a little bit indented in, and then this one goes out again. And then the text over here is not lining up. It doesn't start exactly at the same place. So everything looks a little bit off. And that is something about alignment. So let me show you this. So here, if you draw a line, you will see that nothing's lining up again. It doesn't start exactly at the right place. And that is kind of like the things that give it feels unprofessional, right? Something, it seems not unpolished. It seems like you're not really care or pay attention to what you are designing. I think that's the meaning it gives. So that is why if you just move things a little bit, can you see this, right? So if you move everything from W to C to B and make everything lines up, as well as the logo under at the bottom, it should flash left as well. And then for the text, it should align at the top right here. Everything will look more polished. So that is what alignment talks about. And I think it's really a basic, a foundation that, you know, everybody should think about actually. Even for you as a teacher, when you are, say, designing PowerPoint slide or things like that, you know, think about alignment as well. And again, like I mentioned, the same goes with document. You might want to think about aligning things within the box that you have, right? How much margin you want to keep on the left and on the right. Things like that. But I got the comments asking, would it also depend on the type and purpose of the text? Some text might require messy alignment. That is true. It is actually another kind of like technique in design, which is to make things unbalanced, and that creates attention as well. Right? So there are a lot of things that you can think about exactly. Okay, so now let's talk about contrast. Contrast is another thing, another big thing, and it's quite obvious. So if you look at this black and white photograph, there are a lot of contrast going on, right? Especially because it's black and white, so you can see the contrast of color quite clearly. But so what I mentioned, contrast in light or density is very obvious. Right? You see that the ridge in the middle ground is in deep shadow, and then the ridge behind this is quite dark. This is light, and then this is kind of like in the middle. This is dark again. So the variation in light or density actually make it very like interesting to look at. So contrast. Normally, when we think about contrast, we think about, you know, color contrast. But there are other things as well. For this particular photograph, there is a contrast in form, right? So you see the jacket edges at the bottom. This is curved in the middle, and then the plane at the bottom is very flat. So it plays with the contrast in forms. What else? There's another contrast, which is the contrast in scale. Right? Because the mountains at the back is very grand, and you can see a little tiny animal right here, which is very tiny. So you can play with contrast in scale as well. So that is it. So if you think about creating something, designing something, especially written text, so you can think about making contrast of the font, right? The typeface that you use. And actually that is what some of the participants said earlier about, you know, the poster, that the logo could be smaller, and then the subheading can be a little bigger. So that is kind of like the play with the size, the contrast in size of whatever text that you have. And it will create interest or direct more attention from your audience, of course, right? Contrast in the size. You can also use contrast in colors as well, and or scale, right? So maybe in form. So having different forms onto your design. And lastly, things I want to talk about is proximity. So proximity means the relationship between objects in a space. Actually, we can use proximity for a lot of things, but when it comes to like graphic design, it's how close you put the objects together, let's say. So proximity can indicate the nature of a relationship between objects. So as you can see here, the word red train and then October 30th is actually kind of like very close, or overlapping onto one another. And when you put the two elements very close to each other on a page, it suggests your readers that these two things come together, right? So like I mentioned, proximity offers a clear target. So you can kind of like your eyes might directly towards these first, because you read the red train and then October 30th together, and you know that these two, the red train is playing on October 30th or things like that. So if you put things closer together, it suggests that these two things are a part of one another. And it's the same when you are designing text, right? So if, let's say in a magazine layout, if everything stands apart like this, it seems like they are not together, they don't belong to one another. So what you can actually do is to move things closer, right? So you notice this, like the title over here, right? Just move them closer together, and you know that this part is kind of the heading or the title of this article, like so. So proximity is another thing, right? Again, it offers a clear target, right? So of course, like I mentioned, that you can select kind of like vocabulary or let's say meta language that you want to talk to your students, right? But just for the sake of this talk, I only gave you 5, 6, right? So we talk about mode, of course. We talk about typeface, color, alignment, contrast, and proximity, right? So these are some of the vocabulary for multimodal analysis. And once you kind of like prep them with, language that they need, you can also model for them what they can do for analysis.
Hey, good morning, Father. Sorry, because I'm listening the seminar that we have. But anyway, yes, but a little bit I transfer already. Yes, Father.
Is she talking?
Okay.
Maybe not. Okay. So I'm actually thinking of we don't really have time to look at these, but that's okay. No, let's move on to stage 2. So stage 1, analyzing the text, right? And now it's time to create, right? Once you think that you prepare them enough and they have enough exposure to multimodal text, then it is time for them to create, of course. So I believe that when they are able to analyze and talk about multimodal text, they can more effectively create their own, right? It's better than just ask them to do a poster and that's it, right? You have some kind of like pre-production stage where you prepare them for what they're about to create first. And I think what's important here is that once they are able to analyze and use vocabulary, their creation or their production, and the weight given among various modes should be balanced, of course, because as language teachers, maybe we kind of feel like we should give more weight to language and grammar, right? So if you have 20 points, you might have 15 for language and then 5 points for design, right? But maybe thinking about distributing the weight more equally among modes if we're going to focus on multimodality, because everything constitute meanings, right? Not just word. And then stage 3 is peer review and reflection. I think the fact that they create their multimodal text is good. However, it is the process that they do on their own, right? And we don't really know what they have done. So I think another stage that is really important if you want to implement multimodality is to have them reflect on what they did and also be able to kind of review or assess their peers' work. So actually, this is the kind of like the model that I got when I attended another seminar or workshop. That one actually was about hybrid learning or blended learning, but the speaker kind of like talked about this assessment model, which I think fits really well with multimodal lesson. So there are, let's say there are 3 types of assessment. We have assessment of, assessment as, and assessment for learning. Right, so we have the first one, assessment of learning, which is AOL. So this is summative assessment used primarily to compare students and report progress. So this is going to be a very traditional form of assessment where you ask your student to do at the end, probably like midterm and final exam or things like that. That would be assessment of learning. But there are another type. So we have, of course, as you know, we have summative and formative assessments. But for formative assessment, it can be divided into another 2 subcategories. So the first one, assessment for learning, which is this one, EFL. It is a type of formative assessment utilized by teachers in order to gain an understanding of their students' knowledge and skills in order to guide instruction. So you should have formative assessment throughout your class or your lessons, right? To kind of see what students already understand and what they still still struggle with, so that you can kind of adjust your lessons accordingly. So that is AFL. We have another thing called assessment as learning. And this is another formative assessment, focuses on teaching students the metacognitive processes to evaluate their own learning and make adjustment. So this is kind of like for themselves, they assess themselves or their peers so that they know where they are and how much they understand the content. Right, so if we kind of take a look at take this model of assessment into multimodal text and assessment, I would say that this one, assessment for learning, will be when students actually create multimodal text using all of the vocabulary and analysis knowledge that they have learned earlier. They put those kind of concepts into creating their own multimodal text. To me, I think that is assessment for learning. And then after that, it's going to be time for assessment as learning, which consists of one peer review, where students look at kind of maybe swap or exchange their work, and they're trying to use probably the same rubric that you use to assess their work, right? They will use the same rubric to actually evaluate each other. And another thing that I did that I think very helpful is reflection. I use the term reflection, but it can be either oral or written. Because as I mentioned, that when students create multimodal text of their own, they did it at their own time. We don't really know how much they know or how much of the concepts they have applied into their text or to their multimodal text. So I have another session where they have to kind of present orally for my case. They have to present the process of what they did in order to create their poster and ask them to create a poster. So another section of, oral presentation, talking about their multimodal choices, what modes they use, and what meanings do they think they can convey, using this particular color or this typeface and the way they laid everything out on the page, what kind of meaning they are trying to achieve using those, all of those strategies, let's say. So I think that part is helpful for both, for themselves, so that they can think back about what they did. And it's actually very helpful to me as a teacher, because I can see how much they understand what we have done throughout the class, right? So if you are already ask them to do kind of like oral presentation as a multimodal text, maybe you can ask them to write a reflection, like a short essay, maybe asking them about the same thing as well, what they did, what they think they can do better, or things like that, the same kind of like the reflection or reflective essay would be great, right? So this is kind of like the model of assessment of, as, and for learning, which I think can really be incorporated into, assessing our multimodal text. Right, so just this complete the learning cycle, right? We have stage one, which is analyze, and then we create, and then we reflect. So everything comes into a full circle, and hopefully at the end of this cycle, they will kind of like be more aware of the multimodality that is surrounding them in their everyday life, and maybe be more mindful about composing something, from now on. All right. And actually, that's pretty much it for my talk. And now I'm open to questions, I guess. Actually, we have one activity that I skipped just because I'm afraid that we won't have enough time. But that's fine, right? Let's talk about maybe sharing your experience. Maybe if you have ever done something multimodal in class before, what it works, what it doesn't, or if you have any questions or comments, I would be happy to talk about that as well. Oh, by the way, if you want to look, see this webinar at a later time, okay, feel free to go to our YouTube channel, and search for Language Institute, Thammasat University. If you feel like sharing this to maybe your colleagues, you want them to know a little bit more about multimodality, you can. I think the video will be up probably today or tomorrow, right? And of course, please follow us on Facebook, link2.thammasat. Now it's question time.
Right. Okay, now we would love to have some questions or comments or concerns or whatever it takes, and right, in terms of like multimodality and its application, right? Any questions or anything to say about? Right.
Oh, by the way, Ajahn Monthon has just posted the evaluation form.
Right. Yeah.
So if you want to get the certificate of attendance, right, please complete the form, and then towards the end, it's going to ask you for the information. I got one hand raising. Please go ahead.
Hi, Adorn. Good morning. Still in the morning, right?
Yes, it is.
For sharing your expertise regarding with the modality when it comes to like the use of this one when it comes to the language learning. It's very nice to know that the intercultural of making the graphics and also the language are possible to interact to each other. Because I just realized that we can also teach this kind of topic to our students who are taking like designing, right? Like the customs design in marketing, in poster making, also with our high school students to think more critically when it comes to like making their posters for their projects or presentation. So I know it's kind of a little bit hard for them as we are now facing the pandemic and learning online. However, it's very challenging, and also we keep our students focus on critical thinking about the colors, the texture, and appropriate words and constructions possibly when it comes to the language. Thank you so much, John, for sharing your expertise. I really like your presentation.
ขอบคุณค่ะ thank you and thank you for your active participation as well.
Right.
And
Any
thank you
more?
thank you for all of the wonderful thanks in the chat box as well. I believe some has already left for lunch, which is fine.
I got a little bit of like a bit of comments from the floor as well. Maybe like maybe Ajahn Chanja as well. Maybe you can start first then. Right. Please share something.
Okay, so Candice, right?
Candice. All right. Okay.
Yes.
ค่ะ
Sorry for the inconvenience of showing my face. Yeah, thank you very much for the very interesting talk. I have a question that how to improve trustworthiness when we do the research related to multimodality, because when we try to interpret something, sometimes we cannot, or it's difficult for us to get rid of our own bias, and the experience may influence the way we interpret something, or the culture things may influence the way we interpret. For example, you mentioned the number 555 in Thailand. It means laughter, right? Yes. But yeah, I'm from China. Actually, 555 in China, it means cry. Yeah, yes. Contrast. So how do we to avoid this kind of factors when we try to interpret? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Candice. I got the same questions all the time, like the same kind of concern, especially for people who are doing research with multimodal analysis. And they said, how can I be sure that I don't interpret too far, right? And I would say that you have to think about two things. The first thing is that it's cultural, right? It's culturally based. So whatever text that you analyze, you have to first see where you get it from. What culture? If it is a website, was it written by who, right? But so you have to look at the kind of like the socio-cultural aspects of the source first. It will kind of provide you with background, just like what we talk about CREST analysis, right? If you don't live in UK, how can we know that? So you have to acquire the background first. That will be one thing that will help you. So if you're going to talk about 555, then you have to know that this message comes from who, right? The speaker who used that. And then another thing, the interpretation, especially for graphics and elements like that, I think we really have to do a lot of research and not just talk about, analyze it based on our own understanding, but what the literature talks about. And there are actually quite solid meanings or information that you can get from various texts. You can look at actually the book called Visual Grammar by Kress and Van Leeuwen, I believe. They also have like a nice framework talking about how and what ways you can analyze visual text or visual grammar. So we're not going to say that the color red means danger, and that's it, right? You have to say the color red means dangerous and then cite someone. So I think it's going to be always helpful when you do multimodal research to really put your work into reading or compiling findings from previous studies and say that, hey, I'm not the only one who talked about this. This is what other people found as well. And then the third thing that you can actually do, I think, which is, I think, something that multimodal research is still lacking, is to talk to people who actually either compose that text or perceive that the audience who perceive that text and see what they think about it, right? So if you can either focus on like the participant perceptions, that would kind of like back up your analysis as well. So I think there are many ways you can actually make your interpretation more solid and more reliable. Anything else? I'm trying to read in the box, but there's nothing much. But hopefully if you are doing research, we still need a lot of people who are getting into multimodal analysis and research. So the space, the area is open for all of you. Or even if not, if you actually try to implement that into your classroom and it can turn into some action research, actually, you can analyze your students' work, multimodal text, and do something about it. There is a lot of opportunities that you can do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. Any more comments or questions? I think if we don't have too much time for more questions, so if you have questions or would love to ask some questions, you may leave the questions at our little Facebook. Then you can ask through that channel, and then we can have Dr. Sichon address the question, the answer for you. Right. As our tradition, then we need to have like a photo shoot session, probably. Right. That's the tradition of Litu somehow. Right. So right. Okay. Please, if you would love to be part of our photo shoot session, please show yourself. Right. Thank you. All right. There are 2 pages, so I need to take like 2 or 3 shots, right? Okay. Okay, please get yourself ready, smile, be happy, lunchtime for Thailand. Okay, all right. 3, 2, 1, action. Okay. One more time. 3, 2, 1. Okay, one more time again. 3, 2, 1. Okay, there's someone turning on. Okay, so the last time, please. Okay, 3, 2, 1, action. Okay, right. All right, guys. So thank you so much again for your kind participation. And our next session then for the Lead 2 webinar is this coming Saturday. And this time is more on the test construction on the multiple choice test items in ELT. How are you going to like design appropriate or best possible way to measure your students' ability anyway? That is on our Saturday, the 2nd of October. All right. More information will be available on our little Facebook anyway. Right. Thank you. Okay. So I think that is it for today. All right. If you have missed some of the talk or sessions, please join our Lead 2 YouTube channel. Once again, Lead 2 YouTube channel, you will not only find the current one, but the previous webinars that we have conducted. All right, and more available resources for you as well. All right, so thank you so much anyway for joining me today. And thank you so much. And we hope to see each other again probably next week for the next little webinar. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ka.
Thank
you.
Enjoy lunch.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the heart as well. ขอบคุณค่ะ
Right, thank you.
ขอบคุณนะคะ
ขอบคุณครับ Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Right. นั่นแหละขอบคุณพี่เหมียวด้วยนะ พี่เหมียวมาฟังด้วย Okay. Right, thank you. ลืมไปแล้ว